Current agricultural practices are not sustainable and cause a host of environmental and health issues. In this video, we will provide a little background on current sustainability problems and then compare the alternatives. At the end, we'll tell you what our pick is for the most sustainable farming system. In 2010, the United Nations Environmental Program published a report declaring that current agricultural practices have a huge detrimental impact on finite resources, environmental quality, and human health. Let's take a look at why that is. As recently as 1950, farming practices in the United States looked very different. There were far more family farms with diversified crops and a combination of both plants and animals. So what happened? In an effort to bring food prices down and increase food security, the USDA has enacted a series of policies since the 1960s, nearly every single one of which were favorable to agricultural industrialization and corporate interests. For instance, farm programs subsidize 40% of the cost of farm insurance, which encourages farmers to invest in large monocrop farms or feedlots, an unsustainable practice, although efficient in terms of labor and equipment costs. The Environmental Quality Enhancement Program has invested millions in large-scale animal feedlot operations, one of the biggest offenders of environmental quality regulations. Aside from the data on their toxicity, have you ever driven past one? They smell absolutely wretched. Those changes left us with a wildly unsustainable and inefficient system. Farms are required to use enormous amounts of fossil fuel energy, don't make the most of resources available, and the system as a whole is not successful in providing food security, although food is cheaper these days. This is especially important because the United States is the third largest agricultural producer in the world, so the choices made here have a large impact. So let's sum up some of the cons of industrialized agriculture. 50% of the world's crops are used to feed animals, rather than humans. We end up throwing away or otherwise wasting a lot of the remaining food, and yet at least 1 billion people around the world are undernourished. Meat is produced mainly in concentrated animal feedlot operations. These operations increase greenhouse gas emissions, and animals are fed mainly corn and soybeans. Because they did not evolve to eat that kind of food, they are fed tons of antibiotics to compensate, which eventually end up in our freshwater sources and our bodies. Plus, all that animal poop runs off when it rains. We use a lot of pesticides on our crops, which take fossil fuels to produce, and then run off of the land and end up in our water. Between feedlots and pesticide-covered crops, agriculture is the major cause of toxins in our water. These toxins are responsible for a good number of health issues, such as increased numbers of cancer cases. The whole point of industrializing our farms was to create food security, but more people are food insecure now than when the process began. We're literally poisoning ourselves for no reason. So, what are the alternatives? On the more conservative end, farmers can choose to grow native plants or those that are well adjusted to their region. They can diversify their crops, rotate them, and plant cover crops in between harvests or on areas where there is bare soil. Farmers should integrate livestock and crops in one operation instead of separating them, power their equipment with renewable energy sources, and limit their use of toxic pesticides. Ambitious farmers can use drip irrigation. And consumers should attempt to find local foods and purchase organic and sustainably grown products where possible. And then there are more drastic options for revisualizing our food system. Some people have referred to these options as revolutionary. Let's take a look. Aquaculture has emerged as an option for reducing overfishing. Simply put, it's a fish farm. Some of these actually harm the environment as much as they help if they introduce toxins and large amounts of fish waste to the environment. Contained systems in which water is recycled are the most sustainable, but there are still issues with disposal of waste, and additional research needs to be done into safety of materials and biofilters used. Hydroponics is a method of growing plants that does not use dirt. Instead, water is run over the plant's roots. In some cases, a gravel substrate is used through which the water flows. This system still requires the use of added nutrients to the water, the creation of which requires the use of fossil fuels, so it's not a perfect solution. Aeroponics is similar to hydroponics, but the water is sprayed over the roots instead. This system is more water efficient, but much more finicky. Nutrient additives are still required. Vertical farming makes use of structures such as warehouses. It's a self-contained system in which layers of grow beds rise to the ceiling, each lit by artificial UV lighting. Either hydroponics or aeroponics are used to provide nutrients and irrigation. The environment can be controlled perfectly, allowing for maximum yield and year-round growing. It also allows growers to carefully exclude all toxins. In terms of plants grown per square foot, this is a much more efficient operation. However, it requires more energy to run due to the lighting and automation. Energy sources for this are usually generated through burning fossil fuels. On a commercial scale, vertical farms usually produce fast-growing crops with a high market value, such as lettuce and herby things. Vertical farms are also being produced and sold on a small scale for use by individuals. One company makes them to fit in home closets. And then there's aquaponics, which combines aquaculture and hydroponics to create a system that mimics real-life processes. The water is circulated from the fish tank through the roots of the plants. The plants absorb the fish waste as natural fertilizer and filters the water so that the fish habitat remains clean. This can be combined with vertical farming or used in a greenhouse environment as well. So which option is the winner? Aquaponics, hands down. By including both aquatic life and plants in the same operation, it reduces waste dramatically. While we can use this method in conjunction with vertical farms, it does not require a lot of energy to create artificial light, and no added fertilizers or chemicals are necessary. The system is also highly water efficient. If used in a greenhouse environment, food can be produced year-round. Aquaponics also doesn't require the use of soil, and so can be implemented anywhere, regardless of soil quality of the area. It checks all the boxes.